Experiment 3, Physical and Chemical Properties. Materials. You'll need 3 molar NH3, and the name for NH3 is ammonia, so you may see it labeled like that. You might also see ammonium hydroxide. That's what NH3 becomes when you put it in water. 6 molar NaOH, which is also called sodium hydroxide. 6 molar HCl, which is hydrochloric acid, stomach acid. You'll need test tubes and aluminum foil, and that's about how big a 3 centimeter by 5 centimeter piece would be. Steel wool, and then to the procedure. Part A, physical properties of elements and compounds. So here, you're going to first observe elements. You'd observe the element samples in each vial or container, and on the data sheet you'd record the elemental symbol, so those are the letters that would be in the box on the periodic table. Then the physical state, that'll either be a solid, liquid, or gas, and the color. And be sure you don't open the vials or containers. Some of them release irritant gases like iodine, or some of them smell like rotten eggs like sulfur, so make sure you don't open them. Then you're going to do a similar thing for compound. So you'd observe the compound samples in each vial or container, and on the data sheet you'd record the formula, the physical state, and the color. So, and of course, don't open the vials or containers. And if elements are individual Legos, compounds are what happens when you put 2 different Legos together or multiple Legos together. And so here, the formulas are going to be more than 1 element together. All right, part B, chemical properties. First, obtain a piece of aluminum foil and cut it into 2 equal pieces. Then rub vigorously 1 piece of the aluminum foil on both sides with steel wool. Cut the aluminum. So once you've got it rubbed there, you're going to cut the aluminum foil into 4 strips. Then you'll cut the unrubbed aluminum foil into strips. Obtain 2 test tubes and add 5 milliliters of 6 molar hydrochloric acid, HCl, to each test tube. Place 1 piece of the unrubbed strip of aluminum foil into one of the test tubes and record your observation on the data sheet. Now here you're going to have observations, and for those, make sure you at least do the change in phase, so solid to liquid or solid to gas, and also the change in color, so maybe silver to clear or whatever you observe. And then state whether it's a physical, chemical, or no change, and the evidence for that. 6. Place the rubbed piece of aluminum into the test tube and immediately cover the test tube with your thumb. Here I've covered it with a stopcock until the bubbling has stopped. So here, in this reaction, those bubbles that you see are bubbles of hydrogen gas, which are flammable. So once you've collected that gas in the test tube, you're going to remove the cap, in this case, and you'd insert a lit wooden splint like you saw. Now, because the hydrogen gas is flammable, when you stick that into the gas, it'll all burst, and you might hear a pop. I heard kind of a startling pop when I did this experiment. And you'd record your observation on the data sheet. Pour the contents of one of these test tubes into an evaporating dish, and you can see that little clay dish there is the evaporating dish. Add 5 milliliters of water to the evaporating dish, and when you measure out these milliliters, make sure you look at the meniscus at eye level, so you might have to crouch down to do that. Evaporate the liquid using a hot plate, and note the residue color. And this was the longest part of the experiment for me. Depending on how hot you make the hot plate, it could be anywhere from 10 to 17 minutes. And again, in the observations, you'd want to put phase changes, so liquid to solid, and then color changes also. And you can see the residue there is that powder. Then once the liquid has evaporated, allow the evaporating dish to cool. So you take it off the hot plate, preferably using tongs because you don't want to burn your fingers. And it might take around 5 minutes for that to cool. Add 3 milliliters of water to the evaporating dish and stir with a glass stirring rod to dissolve the solid. So you pour it in the evaporating dish. This is a glass stirring rod, and then you just stir with that. Then you're going to pour the solution into a clean test tube and add 3 milliliters of 3 molar ammonium hydroxide. That's NH3, or you might also see it labeled as ammonia. And after 5 minutes, you'll record your observations on the data sheet. Again, phase change and color change in the observations. Obtain 2 clean test tubes and add 5 milliliters of 6 molar NaOH, which is sodium hydroxide, to each test tube. Add 1 rubbed strip of aluminum foil to one of the test tubes with the NaOH and the unrubbed aluminum foil to the other, to the other test tube with the NaOH, and record your observations on the data sheet. So in this example, the rubbed aluminum foil is on the left and the unrubbed aluminum foil is on the right. And you'd fill this in where it's highlighted in pink on the right, each with their own observations, physical, chemical, or no change, and evidence. And then you just clean up. Thanks so much for your attention.